AI won't replace everyone equally. It will hit the people, jobs, and countries with the least room to survive at first. And once you see who gets sacrificed before the rest of the world even reacts, the future of AI starts looking a lot less like innovation and a lot more like a sorting machine. Everybody has some level of anxiety about what AI is going to do to the future. Usually the conversation gets stuck between two extremes. On one side, you have the familiar optimism. Every major technological leap in history made economies richer. It replaced some jobs, created others, and in the long run, people adapted. On the other side, you have the much darker version of the story. In the past, machines replaced our muscles, which pushed humans into using our minds. But if machines start replacing that too, then what exactly is left for us to sell? And the more I thought about that question, the more I realized something uncomfortable. We may not be able to predict the full future of AI, but we do not actually need to, because some parts of the world are already living closer to that future than others. Some workers are already feeling the ground shift beneath them. Some economies are already discovering what happens when the very thing they built their growth around suddenly becomes much cheaper to automate. And that is the pattern that interests me most. Not the sci-fi version of AI, not the version where robots conquer humanity, but the much more realistic version where AI quietly redraws who gets ahead, who falls behind, and which countries get to keep climbing versus which ones are told politely and efficiently that they are no longer needed. Because once you stop asking, will AI change the economy, and start asking, who is this version of AI designed to benefit, the whole story starts to look very different. The first thing that stood out to me is that AI does not hit every economy at the same time. It hits the most exposed ones first. And that matters because it tells us something important about how this technology actually behaves in the real world. A lot of developing countries spent the last few decades building growth around outsourced service work. Not glamorous work, not cutting-edge work, but stable enough work. Call centers, customer support, transcription, data entry, billing, back office admin, low-level software support. These were the kinds of jobs that made sense in a global economy where rich countries wanted lower costs and developing countries wanted a ladder upward. For a while, it looked like a workable deal. Wealthy countries could offshore routine cognitive labor, and emerging economies could build industries, urban middle classes, and export revenues around that demand. It was not perfect, but it was a path. What makes this so fragile now is that AI happens to be especially good at the kinds of tasks that sit right in the middle of that model. Repetitive text-based work, context-heavy but still structured service tasks, language-based output, scripted support, things that used to require enough human judgment to stay safe from traditional automation, but not enough deep expertise to remain uniquely human once large language models arrived. And that is what makes this wave different. It is not going after the factory floor first. It is going after the office cubicle. The more I looked at places like the Philippines and Bangladesh, the harder it became to think about AI as just a productivity tool. In those countries, this is not just about a handful of workers becoming more efficient. It is about entire economic strategies being put at risk. If a country spent decades building itself into a competitive center for outsourced support work, and then the core value of that work gets eaten by software, the problem is no longer individual. It becomes structural. It becomes national. It becomes the kind of thing that changes growth trajectories. And this is where the pattern gets ugly. Wealthy countries get to use AI to make their firms more productive. Poorer countries risk losing the labor advantage they were depending on to catch up in the first place. That means AI is not entering a level playing field and rewarding everyone evenly. It is landing in a world that was already unequal and then pressing down on exactly the pressure points that make that inequality harder to escape. That was the moment the whole topic started feeling less like a tech story and more like an economic sorting mechanism. Because if AI makes offshore labor less necessary, then some countries are not just losing jobs. They are losing relevance in the value chain they were told would help them develop. And once you start asking who this system is really benefiting, you naturally begin to notice something else. AI doesn't arrive everywhere at the same time, and it definitely doesn't hit everyone equally. The more I looked into it, the less it felt like a global wave, and the more it felt like a sequence, like certain parts of the world were being tested first. And those places weren't random. They were the ones that had quietly built entire economies around doing the kind of work AI is getting very, very good at. Not glamorous work, but essential work. Customer support, transcription, billing, data processing, back office tasks. The kind of jobs that sit in the background of the global economy, keeping everything running smoothly. For years, this model made sense. Companies in wealthy countries could outsource these tasks to places where labor was cheaper, and in return, those countries got jobs, growth, and a pathway into the global economy. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. There was a kind of balance to it. But what I didn't fully appreciate until recently is how fragile that balance actually was, because it depended on one assumption, that human labor, even for routine cognitive tasks, would remain cheaper and more flexible than automation. And that assumption is starting to break. AI doesn't need sleep. It doesn't need training cycles in the same way. It doesn't negotiate wages or take time off. And more importantly, it's getting better at exactly the kind of work that used to justify outsourcing in the first place. Structured communication, pattern recognition in text, repetitive decision-making with just enough context to feel human. And when that happens, the entire economic logic starts to shift. Not gradually, but structurally, because if a company can get the same output faster and cheaper from a model, the question is no longer, should we outsource this? It becomes, why are we outsourcing this at all? That's the part that stuck with me. This isn't just about jobs disappearing. It's about certain types of work losing their role in the global system. And when that happens, it's not just individuals who are affected. It's entire countries that suddenly find themselves less relevant in the value chain they spent decades trying to climb. And once you see that, it becomes hard to think of AI as just a neutral tool. It starts to look more like a force that quietly reshapes where value lives in the world. Not by destroying everything at once, but by targeting the exact layers that were holding certain economies together. And once you see how unevenly AI hits different countries, the next uncomfortable question almost asks itself, if nations aren't affected equally, why would workers be? That's where the story stops being abstract and starts feeling personal. Because AI isn't replacing labor in some broad, neutral way. It's sorting people, quietly, efficiently, and in ways that are much more specific than the usual headlines suggest. Some workers are going to become dramatically more valuable because of AI. Others are going to find out that the thing they thought made them employable was actually much easier to automate than anyone wanted to admit. What really changed for me was realizing that AI doesn't reward effort equally. It rewards position. If your job is built around judgment, synthesis, trust, or making decisions inside messy situations, AI can make you faster, sharper, and more productive. It can remove the repetitive parts of your work and leave you with the parts that matter most. But if your job is built around following a process, completing repeatable tasks, or producing outputs that can be standardized, then AI doesn't necessarily help you. It starts to compete with you. And that creates a divide that is much deeper than high skill versus low skill. It's closer to this. Are you using AI as leverage, or are you being measured against it? That distinction matters because two people can be equally hardworking, equally intelligent, and equally serious about their careers, and still end up on opposite sides of this shift. One becomes more productive and therefore more valuable. The other becomes easier to replace. Not because they failed, but because the structure of their role happened to be easier to absorb into software. I think that's why so much of the AI debate feels emotionally confusing. People keep talking about jobs as if they're all affected in the same way, but they're not. AI doesn't just eliminate work. It rearranges where bargaining power lives. It increases the value of people who direct, interpret, and decide. And it weakens the position of people whose main value was execution. That's a very different kind of labor shock from the ones people are used to imagining. It means the people who win may not just be the smartest or the hardest working. They may simply be the ones sitting in the part of the system that gets amplified instead of substituted. And once you realize that, the question stops being, will AI replace jobs? It becomes much more personal. and much more uncomfortable. On which side of that divide are you standing? But even that is not the deepest layer of the story. Because underneath the labor question is an even more important one. Who actually owns the upside? That is where AI stops being just a workplace issue and starts looking like a capital story. And once you see AI as capital, a lot of the pattern becomes brutally clear. In past waves of technology, the relationship between labor and machines was often complementary. A worker using a better machine could produce more. A farmer with mechanized equipment, a factory worker using better tooling, an accountant with better software. The machine increased output, but the human remained central. In many cases, productivity gains lifted wages and living standards because workers still had a necessary place in the process. AI is not always like that. Sometimes it complements labor, but often it shifts power toward whoever owns the model, the infrastructure, the data, and the distribution layer around it. That makes AI unusually concentrated. A handful of firms train the biggest systems. A handful of countries dominate compute, chips, cloud infrastructure, advanced research talent, and financing. A handful of platforms collect the data that feeds the next generation of models. In other words, the rewards do not flow broadly just because the technology is broad. They flow toward whoever controls the stack. And that may be the single most important hidden pattern behind the AI economy. AI does not just change work. It changes bargaining power. If you are a worker using tools you do not own, then your productivity may rise without your share of the gains rising much at all. If you're a small firm licensing models from giant companies, you may become more efficient while becoming more dependent. If you're a country without the infrastructure, research base, capital markets, or hardware supply chain to compete seriously in AI, then you may end up renting intelligence from the countries that do. That is not just a technology story. That is a story about ownership, concentration, and dependency. And it explains why the richest countries are positioned to capture so much of the value. They do not just have more skilled workers. They have the capital markets, the patents, the server infrastructure, the talent pipelines, the cloud ecosystems, and the political weight to turn AI into something more than a tool. They can turn it into an asset class, a geopolitical advantage, a productivity engine that compounds on top of all the advantages they already had. Once I started looking at AI that way, the emotional tone of the whole subject changed for me. It stopped feeling like a simple labor market disruption and started feeling more like a power transfer. Because if the future belongs to those who can own and deploy the most powerful models, then workers and even nations that do not own those assets are not just behind. They are increasingly dependent on the people who do. That is the kind of inequality that can survive even when productivity is booming. In fact, it can grow because of it. That brings us to the question that actually matters. If this is the pattern, then what do people do with that knowledge? And for me, the first answer is that we need to stop talking about AI as though it arrives in a vacuum. It lands inside existing structures of ownership, education, infrastructure, class, and national power. That means the same tool can produce very different outcomes depending on who has access to it, who owns it, and who gets protected while the transition happens. At the country level, this means the response cannot just be build more AI. Countries that want to avoid being pushed further to the margins need digital infrastructure, broadband access, education systems that actually teach adaptable skills, and retraining systems that work in practice, not just in speeches. They need pathways for workers to move into roles where AI complements them instead of replacing them. They also need the political will to invest in people, not just in the idea of innovation. At the individual level, I think the lesson is uncomfortable, but useful. It is no longer enough to think in terms of jobs alone. You have to think in terms of function. Are you doing work that AI is likely to automate directly, or work that becomes more valuable when AI handles the routine layers around it? Are you being paid for executing a process or for making decisions inside complexity? Are you competing with the machine, or are you learning how to sit above it, steer it, or use it as leverage? That does not mean everyone can magically transform into a high-level strategist overnight. It does mean the old assumptions about safety in the labor market are probably weaker than they look. Routine cognitive work used to feel protected because it required language, context, and soft judgment. That moat is shrinking. The safer ground seems to be moving toward roles that combine technical fluency with human judgment, communication, creativity, trust, and responsibility for outcomes. The deeper realization, though, is this. The real danger is not just AI itself. It is not understanding the system AI is entering. Because once you see the pattern, the conversation changes. It stops being, will AI change everything, and becomes, who is building the ladders and who is quietly removing them? It becomes, who owns the upside? It becomes, who gets multiplied and who gets made cheaper? And maybe that is the most important thing to leave with. AI is not creating winners and losers at random. It is revealing the structure of the world it entered, then accelerating it. If you understand that, you are already asking a better question than most of the conversation is willing to ask. And from there, maybe you can start making smarter decisions about where to build skills, where to place attention, and what kind of future you are actually preparing for. Because in the end, the real risk may not be that AI becomes too powerful. It may be that the people in places with the least room to absorb the shock are the ones expected to absorb it first. AI doesn't create inequality. It exposes and accelerates it. The real shift isn't just technological, it's structural. If your role is built on repetition, you compete with AI. If it's built on judgment and leverage, you grow with it. So the real advantage today is not working harder, but understanding where you stand in the system and moving before the system moves you. So here's a simple question. Do you feel like AI is helping you grow or quietly replacing what you do? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can see different perspectives. And if this made you think, subscribe to support the channel and help keep these deep dives going.